There you go. And when you are not speaking or asking a question, please mute yourself and turn off your camera if you'd like. Definitely mute yourself. We just don't want that cross noise going on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Creating, Growing, and Sustaining Walking School Bus and Bike Train programs. Let me share our agenda for the day. Today we have two great speakers, Sam Balto with Portland Public Schools and Megan Ramey with Bike About and Hood River. Sam will be presenting on walking school buses and Megan's going to be presenting on bike trains. We ask that you hold your questions until the Q&A section, which will happen after Megan is finished with her presentation. If you have questions and you're afraid you're going to forget them, go ahead and put that in the chat box. We have folks who are monitoring that too, so we'll make sure that your question gets answered. After the Q&A session, we'll be going into breakout scenarios. I'll explain more when it comes to that. You'll be able to actually choose which breakout room you want to go into to discuss a walking school bus or bike train scenario and kind of build your own and brainstorm with other folks. And we will not be returning after those breakout sessions. So at 1, I'll be ending the call and we'll be done. But I'll be sure to send out a warning. All right. And with that, I want to introduce our speakers again. We have Sam Balto with Portland Public Schools and Megan Ramey with Bike About. And we'll go ahead and get started with Sam's walking school bus. And I'm going to stop sharing because Sam is going to share his own presentation.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I hope the weather's nice where you are. I'm going to put on my special coach safety hat, which is my hat that I started wearing in Boston to engage my students there around safe routes to school. As you can see here in the first picture, at the end of every walking school bus day event, we would take a photo of our group on the steps of our school. So we'd sort of arrive a little bit before the whole rush of buses and everybody else, and we were able to take a photo. So notice the size of the photo. Spring 2015, and then at the end of the presentation, I'll show you winter of 2018. So I'm an avid safe routes to school tactical urbanism enthusiast. That is Tom Brady's face on a school crosswalk sign, which sort of kick-started our efforts to improve infrastructure at our school, the Ellis Elementary in Roxbury, which resulted in just shy of $1 million infrastructure improvement to the area. I'm a tactical urbanist, so I was participating in the Red Cup project, putting red cups out to show how paint is ineffective to provide protection. And I'm a phys ed teacher. So during the pandemic, I closed off our street or opened up our street for physically distant PE class where every family had their own family square. We had a speaker, and from March until the end of the school year in June, we would have PE class in the street open to everybody and COVID safe. So I'm here today to talk about the walking school bus. First, I cannot speak enough in my experience as a teacher in Washington, DC, Boston, and in Portland. There is nothing I have seen that builds strong school community like the walking school bus. The benefits are endless for children: more physical activity, better social and emotional learning, and greater independence. And for everyone, improves air quality around the school, less traffic congestion, and creates a strong school community. And with COVID, walking to school, being outside is the safest way to move around. I heard earlier this week on NPR, they were talking about transmission on school buses, and they were having to look at videotapes on the school bus to see which kids are sitting next to each other. I mean, this just seems like a total nightmare, and which is why we need to incorporate walking school buses into our student transportation plan. All right, so how do we get started? So I'm viewing this as a teacher, somebody on the inside in a school, and I sort of describe myself as the Trojan horse in all of this. If you parents, anybody in the community know of a teacher that is engaged in safe routes to school, do everything you can to prop them up, to support them with funds, time, resources, whatever you can do. Teachers are key in this. We are able to push parents where as a parent myself, I can't imagine talking to another parent telling them to, you know, drive less or to consider walking. But as a teacher, I can talk to the students about the benefits. And then students are incredibly persuasive to convince parents. So how to start a walking school bus? I personally start by looking at the bus route, and we'll talk about this. I'm able to have access to the student database, so I can pull up where all the students live, which helps with outreach, and then creating a preferred walking map so families are aware of times to meet, the route, etc. All right, so here's a map of my school in Boston. Inside the black circle is 1 mile. So in Boston, if you live greater than a mile, you qualify for the bus. So I had students who lived on the same block as me. If you lived on the 1.1 mile side of the street, you qualified for the bus. If you lived to the other side of the street, you didn't. So you had to walk, your parents had to figure it out, etc. What I look at when creating the walking school bus is this 1 mile to 1.25 mile range and in, because everybody is benefiting. Lots of times for the students who do qualify for the bus, but they live in a walkable distance, walking or biking can be a much better option. You have more control about what time you leave school and what time you arrive to school and then arrive home, etc. So we're sort of going to talk about that a little bit more, but 1.25 or greater, you know, leave the buses alone. And that also provides a better experience for those students who have to, you know, take the bus because they don't live in a walking distance, especially with our bus driver shortages these days. You know, there's certain students that we do not want all of those parents driving in, but there are a group of kids who do live a walking distance, who do currently receive bus service, but they could walk. So if you were to provide a walking school bus, a different service, parents, students, you know, with the right engagement, will start to sort of move away from the bus to the walking school bus or a bike train, creating a better service for students who do actually, you know, don't have any other choices besides taking the bus or being driven. And then all the students who live within a mile also benefit from the walking school bus or a bike train. So I start by just looking at the bus list. In Portland, this is public information. And what I will do is I'll just map out the bus routes. So I just go into Google Layers and I start making bus routes to sort of look at it that way. And I actually did this last night with my school in Portland because they just totally changed up our buses. We lost one, we lost 2 buses. One bus is picking up super early, dropping the kids off 25 minutes before the bell, then doubling back to do another route. So this is just prime for walking school buses. And I broke down which buses are 1.25 miles and less and which ones are greater. And we're leaving the ones that are greater and trying to steer our walking school buses towards the routes that are 1.25 or less. So you can see here, there's 4 circles. Those are the bus stops that are within that 1.25 miles or less. So it's within the 1.25 miles or less. So that's kind of what I'm targeting. Those are students and families who actually will receive a better service than a school bus lots of the time by providing a walking school bus or a bike train. And then from that, you see the different colors. Those are the bus stops. And I'm able to go back to my bus list in Boston. It had students' names, addresses, and I could directly reach out and explain, tomorrow there's a walking school bus. We're meeting at this corner, and you can do some direct outreach. And then from those stops, you know, finding key points, locations, one's like a train station, the other one's a key intersection, one's a community center, one's a park. Finding these, you know, easy areas where a group of people can congregate to wait for everybody else to come, and then on corridors, walking corridors that are safer. And that takes outreach, talking to parents. Hey, would you take this street? Would you take that street, etc. And then going back to your student database list, which, if you're able to work with a teacher, they would have access to this. And this is critical because you can also reach out to the students who live within the 1 mile, say like, hey, you don't need to walk by yourself. There's going to be a walking school bus coming. I think about a student that I had in Boston whose mother, he lived 0.5 miles away from the school. He's a 5th grader. Every morning, his mom would pay for a cab for him to get to school. I mean, the first hour of her job, that money went to pay for the cab for him to get to school because it wasn't safe for him to walk alone. But maybe that mother would feel differently letting him walk in a walking school bus with a large group of students, people from the community, teachers, staff, parents, grandparents leading walking school buses. And just think about how that could transform, his experience, the mother's experience, not having to spend, $10 to $15 a day on that expense of student transportation. And then creating a walking school bus map. So this is what we would send out to families with the different stops. And I know Megan's really skilled at this as well. So keys to success, bring the walking school bus to the students and families. So sort of seeing where they live, sort of targeting, being really targeted, and then creating those routes for them. Create a walking map so it's really easily communicated. People know where you're going, being consistent. I would say cold calling, making phone calls to these families. We are so trained to think, you're driven or you take the bus. It's like, okay, this is your bus stop. You show up, a bus takes you to school. If you, send home a piece of paper that says, hey, instead of taking the bus, we're doing a walking school bus, not everybody is going to understand what that means. Not everybody's going to understand that a walking school bus is led by, people from the community that are trained, have background checks, et cetera, that they're going to walk them all the way to the school and also home. So the cold calling and the outreach, I have found makes a huge impact for the success. And then last, promote, make it fun and promote some more. We are trying to change how students get to school around a quadrillion-dollar busing system that we have done forever. We're trying to change how students and families view student transportation. This is not something easy. So you really have to go that extra effort. And the last one, this is what I say about a lot of the stuff that I do. I try my hardest to be a winner, which means I want to have success. We are incredibly busy. Parents are incredibly busy. We don't have time to just talk about ideas. All right. We need to produce something. We actually need to create something. So if you're going to talk and take people's time about a walking school bus, be ready to produce, be ready to win, be ready to actually lead it, instead of just being these ideas that we just theoretically talk about, but then nothing happens. So I don't really engage with families unless I feel confident that we can take the next step after that. So being a winner is incredibly important. That only builds more success down the road. So some of the promoting, my school in Boston was very fortunate. We had Wally from the Boston Red Sox. In the bottom left, the kids are showing off their winter walk to school day gloves that I custom made with puffy paint. And then to the other one is Tito Jackson, who is our city councilor, who was also running for mayor at the time. So in my school in Boston, I had tons of city councilors, mayors participating. So, it's such an easy way to build support and success. All right. And now how do we make this sustainable? It's all about the Benjamins. So if anybody knows who the third person is, it's myself, my son, and Congressman Peter DeFazio, who is the chair of the House Committee for Transportation and Infrastructure. This guy is incredibly important because he has access to our transportation funds on the federal level. So, and a lot of you live in his district, so you are incredibly important. We have to figure out how to move bus funds to walking school bus funds. To make walking school buses sustainable, they need to come with actual money. The volunteer system is not equitable. Relying on parents to volunteer their time is not sustainable. Relying on BIPOC parents to volunteer, absolutely unacceptable. All right, we have to provide funds. You have to compensate people for their time. So this is an example I presented to my principal last night, actually. So a school bus in Portland costs about $50,000 a year. 6 parents to lead 2 walking school bus routes, $15 an hour, 2 hours a day, 180 school days. All right, that comes out to $5,400. Oops, I gotta remove a zero per parent, but it saves the district $17,000, over $17,000. So there is a financial incentive to districts to provide for schools to help us move away from school buses and to provide the service with all of the benefits. If you are interested in more information, I have some articles about this that I wrote in Streets Blog, Massachusetts, sort of breaking down the walking school bus, how it needs to be part of our COVID response plan, and also 3 ideas for the next infrastructure package that I wrote in Streets Blog USA. And finally, if you remember the first photo back in Boston, how many students were on the steps? And now if you look at this winter 2018, completely packed. Current Mayor Kim Janey's on the steps with us. It was an absolutely incredible morning, and something I'll never forget, having all the walking routes meet up right in front on the steps. My information is down below. Please feel free to reach out, email, follow me on Twitter. I really appreciate you all for being here. This is incredibly important work. I'm here. This is my passion. This is my hobby. I love it. So thank you all so much, and I'll answer any questions after. I think I need to stop it.
Thank you so much, Sam. I'm going to take over sharing, and we will go to Megan. If I can figure it out. There we go. Wrong thing, never mind. All right. And now we have Megan presenting on bike trains.
Hello, you guys. So my name's Megan Ramey, and I'm actually coming to you from Cascade Locks. I am doing a bike ride on the historic Columbia River Highway with my parents who are visiting from Wisconsin. And so I feel blessed to be outside and talking to you guys about this right next to my bike. So please interrupt me if you have a hard time hearing me. So I was born in Madison, Wisconsin. So biking is in my blood. I moved to Boston in 2008, and it was so wonderful seeing Sam's photos. And it's so funny. I kick myself for not knowing all the amazing advocates in Boston when I lived there for 8 years. But I think Boston really lit a fire of advocacy in my belly. I took it for granted in Madison. And when I moved to Boston, I was like, oh, we got work to do. So I was on the board of Livable Streets in Boston for 8 years. And then the dream of Pacific Northwest moved us to Hood River. And I took a year off from advocacy, and my daughter started attending May Street School, which is pretty much right in the epicenter of Hood River, and we were walking to school. And it was, I noticed a few things as an advocate. You can't shut your brain off when you're just walking or biking somewhere, but I still absorbed as much as I could. And I think it was year 3, I started getting more involved and started contacting the principal. And at that time they were rebuilding the new school, and all I wanted to see was the transportation plans for the school. I had faith that they were going to make the school inside engaging, but for some reason or the other, I wasn't able to really get my hands on the transportation plans. And there are a lot of missed opportunities, but when it was all said and done, COVID happened, which is the beginning of the bike train story. You can go to the next slide. I think you might have missed one. Oh, okay.
All right, watch out for the intersection. Morning. Morning, Liam.
I think that's the end of the video. So that was, my husband is one of the bike train volunteers, and he took that video on one of the days that I wasn't there. And it's, you'll notice at the beginning, Madeline right there with the blue helmet on, she had her backpack on the side of her handlebars. I think I got so many comments about how unsafe that was. And it's funny because I think a couple days later, she was riding like that. And I started just taking the kids' backpacks as being like, as part of the conductor duty of putting them in my basket or my box bike to help them out. But it was funny, she got one of her straps caught in her wheel, and she wasn't going fast, but she learned her lesson. I just wanted to point that on the video. So I think we can go to the next slide. And I also want to say I am super jealous of Sam. I totally missed the idea of bringing my conductor hat, and then I have a gold sequin blazer that I wear when I do train conducting duties, and the kids love it. We call it Sparkle Motion, as reference to a Donnie Darko movie. But I thought about making sequin blazers for all the train conductors. So what is a bike train? We have typically two conductors who are volunteer parents, one at the front, one at the back. And then other parents actually, they always join us. So we always have like 2 or 3 parents on the way to school or from school. Students can, we do both. We actually have both now this year. We have a bike train and a walking bus. So students can ride or walk, and their parent can join them or not. They learn safety and safe routes. And so I think this is my biggest, I guess, aha moment with the bike train. I started the bike train because I saw the long school vehicle drop-off line, and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to do something to help these parents. Like, why they need some like, I don't understand why parents have so much, they need more free time. And so but in operating this bike train, what I've noticed is that the kids have never biked outside their driveway. If they have, their parents have put their bikes on their vehicle, driven to a trailhead, and biked on a car-free trail, which is what, of course, where they feel comfortable. Or they've taken them to Post Canyon, which is our mountain biking area, and they're encouraged to go as crazy as they want to. So in operating the bike train, I am teaching them literally how to ride their bikes, whether it's just basic balance, bike handling skills, and not weaving all over the place, and using their left hand signal or their right hand signal, or just picking a line and staying in that line, and telling your fellow your fellow students when you're going to pass them, like all these things that I think I've taken for granted, teaching my daughter how to bike from, 3 years old as a balance biker on. These kids have never had that as fifth graders. And so we're teaching them how to ride their bikes. So that in and of itself is just gold. And the parents love that. And then we're teaching them safe routes. And so what we've seen with the bike train is that we have a fourth grader who just didn't know how to get to school. And that seems trivial, but they really don't know which streets are safe, and just how to find those desire lines. And so once they start doing it for a couple of weeks, they graduate out of the bike train and they're off by themselves. Their parents feel confident letting them go. And that's also gold, because then they start to understand what it means to be a safe route. Because in Hood River, we very much lack safe infrastructure. So we make up for it by picking neighborhood streets and stitching those together. So the students are picked up. It's just like a walking school bus or a regular school bus. There's a route, and there's school bus stops with times, and they're picked up near those stops and they join us. And then after school, the conductors kind of gather the students up, and we actually have two trains, a red train and a blue train. They go to different neighborhoods, and we pretty much know all the students. Sometimes some students will come up at the end of the day and be like, I'm supposed to ride home on the bike train, and their parents didn't tell us in advance. And so I just, by asking them where they live, their address, we figure out which train they're supposed to be on. So next slide. So I told you the bike train was kind of birthed out of COVID, and that is exactly what happened. So it was last October for National Bike and Walk to School Day. And this is a full, 6 months into distance learning with COVID. And Principal Kelly, who's standing there in the background with his hands on his hips, he contacted me and said, man, we miss seeing the kids. And I think they need to get outside and be with each other in a safe way. What can we do? And I said, we need to do, we need to make Bike and Walk to School Day big, and use this opportunity to get them to bike to school. And so we did actually a Bike and Walk to School Day after the distance learning schedule ended, which was at noon. Parents joined us at noon at two different, bike train terminuses. not Terminus's origins, and biked to school and didn't stop and paraded all around the school with the parents, not the parents, the teachers are like, you can see them in the background. They're all cheering on the students. And what you can't see is like Principal Kelly right there is crying. And so are a lot of those teachers because they haven't seen their students in a long time. And I get like emotional thinking about this right now because it was it was super emotional, and the kids were cheering each other on, and then we just did a loop around the school. We didn't stop, and we then took them back to their homes. And so that was it was about 110 kids and parents that participated that day, and that was I guess the beginning of everything. And so fast forward from October to March when we reopened, and the kids went back to school, Principal Kelly was like, we need to do bike train, because I already can foresee there being major traffic issues with vehicle drop-offs. And so he entrusted me to start this program. And that was it. We started well, I'll wait for a second, but that third bullet point is important to underscore, is that Principal Kelly and I had developed a relationship of trust, just as me. I mean, he probably, before he really got to know me, just thought of me as the crazy bike lady, which is what a lot of people in town probably think of me as. But it became a point where he understood that I really am interested in the welfare and happiness of children and the students. And that's like, for me, that's everything with walking and biking to school, is just child happiness. So developing a relationship of trust with your principal is so important. You can go to the next slide. So, so the common pitfalls of bike train, to start off, is Sam talked about this, is just you're depending on volunteers, and it is unequitable. A lot of my parent volunteers are so happy. I mean, I have one parent volunteer who's running the red train morning and afternoon, and his child has graduated from May Street Elementary. He's not even going there. He's at the middle school now, and he's like, he just wants exercise. He wants to be around the kids, and he just wants that. It's almost like a feeling of euphoria after you run the bike train. So yeah, it is unequitable, and we need to get to a position where we're paying our volunteers, but we're dependent on them. And it takes a very special person. I mean, I talked about, we're teaching these kids how to bike. We're teaching them how to bike around other children. And so you automatically have to have somebody that's a little more chill. They can't be high strung and trying to be micromanaging all the kids. You have to pick your battles. So there's some training of the volunteers that happen, is like, pick your battles. And if they're being that unsafe where you think that they could injure themselves or possibly die, then we need to have a conversation with that child and their parents. But don't, I mean, like I had a conversation with one of my volunteers. He was just nitpicking everything that the kids were doing constantly. And I was like, this has got to be fun for them. So volunteer management is definitely a thing with running the bike train. And the volunteers that are really good at it will stay around. And I haven't really had very many I haven't had one that has dropped off. So it's been wonderful. And then kids' bike handling skills is a thing. And I've had a couple of very stressful moments. It's been about 4 of them. I can think of them off the top of my head, where kids have been very close to being seriously injured or or dying. And we've had conversations about it one-on-one, and the kids know as soon as something happens, they're like, whoa, and they stop. And I just try not to draw extra attention to them because the other kids are around. I don't want them to feel like they have done something wrong, because they honestly haven't. They've, like, it's the system design that has led them to where they don't know how to ride bikes. They don't have safe streets to ride them in. It's not their fault. They're just being kids. And so I'm trying to help them foresee what I call using their spidey sense, and foreseeing when tricky situations might be coming up and when they need to be extra mindful of those situations. And so it just takes just some patience. It's almost like you need to find some natural Valium and realize that you're doing more good than you are harm with running this bike train. And then the equipment and the apparel. I mean, we saw the video with Madeline in her backpack and putting it on her handlebars. It's just not, you have all these random little hiccups like flat tires or what was one? Oh, there was a little boy that needed to carry home like this huge diorama model. And we were like, okay, how are we going to get that? And luckily one of us had a cargo bike and we rigged it on. So there's all these random, you know, it's just like life stuff that happens and you just need to roll with it. And then the parents, we have parents on two very different spectrums, and then there's a big swath in between. There's the parents that are, my kids should always bike on the sidewalk. They should never bike in the street. That's what I tell them. They need to be on the sidewalk, and I have to kindly tell them that's not only is it against the law in certain parts of Hood River, but we're trying to keep them actually biking in the street sometime is safer because of all the driveways and curb cuts. We've had a couple of close calls with kids biking on the sidewalk and the cars coming out of the driveway. So there's a parents on that side of the spectrum that you kind of have to talk to, and then there's the parents on the other side of the spectrum where I've had to say, listen, Mariah is an amazing little girl. She scares me sometimes because she is like super risky, and I'm just afraid, like, you need to talk to her about paying attention to the conductors and doing what they say. And it took one conversation like that with the mom, and Mariah's like, you know, always biased now. So yeah, you just have to be willing to have those difficult conversations sometimes with parents on both sides of the spectrum. The next slide. So tips for running, starting a bike train. So again, referencing Sam's presentation, I love the maps. I mean, by trade or hobby, I am an amateur cartographer and make maps for Bike About on how on just the best bike routes in cities. And so this was like an easy thing for me to do. I took the two underserved neighborhoods in Hood River, not only the underserved, but just like the most, like, there's some critical intersection issues where unless there's parents around, the kids cannot navigate those intersections. And so that's how I designed the two routes. And I also had to be cognizant of hills because Hood River is incredibly hilly. So I had a clear route map. I timed the schedules as best I could. We still had to tweak them over time. And we stuck to the schedule. Like if we were early, we waited at that stop. If we were late, we apologized later. But sticking to the schedule is super important. And then learning the kids' names is like, I can't underscore how important that is. Every time I've had to correct one of the students, like just knowing their name is the difference between them paying attention or not, and rewarding them. Like, I will like fist pump in the air and be like, Madeline, that was amazing. Or like Kylie, this one little girl, she used her spidey sense and she could actually hear when a car was about to pull out. I was holding my breath and she stopped and corked the entire train of girls behind her. And it was like, I was so happy I had to yell out her name. So knowing their names is really important. And then getting the parents' cell phone numbers, contact information in case unexpected things happen. I mean, at the beginning of the school season, I was like holding my breath, hoping we didn't have a smoke day. But then there's going to be some ice or snowy days coming up where I send out a text alert. And then just saying thank you to the volunteers. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do this without the volunteers, and they're super passionate like I am, and it's almost like we're fostering this community of advocacy just naturally between the conductors and these little kids who are like, that intersection should be safer, or like, we need a bike lane. It's amazing. So next slide. So I, before we go on to letting Emily have it back, one quick final, I guess I have a couple updates I'm really excited to share. One is Oregon Department of Transportation is funding a grant for me to expand the bike train and walking bus, which is awesome to I guess kind of be paid for what I was doing as a volunteer, and also to run on bike and walking education through the PE classes at May Street Elementary. But we also are going to be doing a big bike and walk to school day coming up in October, and the principal and the city has given me approval to do a demonstration of what a school street is on that day. And so I've already gotten preliminary approval from our engineer at the city, and so I'm really excited to showcase what a school street is, because we have some big time issues with parents evading the drop-off line and going into the area where the walking and biking entrances. So look for that. I am on, like Sam, I'm very active on Twitter because I love sharing all these videos and photos of the kids biking and walking to school. Also on Instagram, I think it's May Street Walk and Roll on Instagram. So thank you so much for letting me share this. It's definitely a labor of love.
Thank you so much, Megan. Yes, and I will be sharing, with their permission, Megan and Sam's contact information and Twitter handles and all of that as well too. Before we go into questions, I just wanted to direct everyone's attention to some resources on walking school buses and bike trains. The Oregon Safe Routes to School website has a bunch of resources there too, and you can subscribe to our newsletter that gives you updates on events coming up as well too, and you can do that on the website. We also posted a few resources too from other organizations. There's King County Metro has a great walking school bus guide, and then El Monte also too has great DIY guide that is also in Spanish, which is great. And then I also have these two articles from Sam that he wrote that he shared earlier. I'll be sending all of these out to the participants in this webinar, so don't feel like you have to write them all down now, because they'll be coming in an email very shortly. All right. And with that, I wanted to go to questions, and we'll do about 5 minutes for Q&A so that we have some time for those breakout rooms. Let's see. Perfect. Any questions? Anyone have anything? Oh, I do actually. I have a question here from Patty, and she asks Megan if you'd be willing to share any material or info related to conductor training.
Sure. I don't have a formal program, but I think if you reached out to me, I'm trying to think the best way to share just my it's kind of like all in my brain of me just being with the conductors every week, but I need to write that down. And so I don't have anything right now, but I would love to have a conversation with you one-on-one if you wanted to.
Craig has a question, and that she would like to learn more about what platform you created your maps in, both Megan and Sam.
Megan's definitely probably more skilled than me. I use Google Maps layers to do it, to sort of organize and then to be able to draw the maps. And I'm pretty elementary at it, but Megan's probably much more.
No, I actually love Google Maps too. It's what I use for Bike About as well. So I create the base layer in Google Maps using the, you can draw on it. So I draw with the, I draw the routes using Google Maps, but then I just do a screenshot and copy and paste it into Paint. And that's where I put the schedules, those timetables. With Bike About, I take that screenshot and pop it into Illustrator, and because I do a little bit more graphic design over it. But Google Maps is a great base layer.
This is a question from Kaylin that I'm sure a lot of coordinators and educators have. This is for Sam. How do you balance your time with the walking school bus work and your PE teaching? What tips do you have for coordinators on that?
I wonder if you were talking to my wife about this question. I don't have the best balance. I really love safe routes to school, but as a phys ed teacher, safe routes to school, walk to school day, the CDC says kids need 60 minutes of physical activity and they don't get that at school. So finding creative ways to increase the amount of physical activity, walking school buses, or any safe routes to school program really benefits the goals of physical education. So I'm working on finding a balance, but finding phys ed teachers, sort of helping them see that connection. I think I need to do a better job helping phys ed teachers see that connection, that we do have a role in this to support and advocate for safer walking and biking, because it does impact students' physical activity tremendously.
Very good. This is a question from Julie. It might be more district, but I think, Megan, you could speak to it. So on the smoky days, do you shut down the bike trains and walking school buses? And what if the students are going to walk or roll to school anyway? Megan, I think that was, oh, sorry.
Yeah, for me personally, I've said that any, what did I say? On the bike sharing brochure, I said, or in the walking bus brochure, I said, all weather goes, dress appropriately, AQI above 100 cancels the bike, train, and walking bus. And so I personally can't be outside when it's above 100. If I do, then it just affects my lungs. So I'm really at a loss for what to do in those situations, because I know people are going to walk and bike anyway, but I don't want to subject the volunteers to that.
I think it's also really important, like a lot of times when I talk to people about it, I get a lot of the whataboutisms, like, oh, what about if it snows? What about if it rains? It's like, yeah, and there's kids who don't qualify for the bus, who don't have parents who can drive them, who have to figure it out by themselves. So by having a walking school bus or a bike train, you're supporting the most vulnerable students who have to get to school on their own. You're providing them something. So yes, the kid now, if you're not riding the bus, or you might have to walk in the rain, but that's already happening for students, who don't have parents who can drive them. They're already walking in the snow. So you're making it safer for those students as well.
Great. That's yeah, a really good point to bring up there. Just all kids need to get to school. Another comment from Sean, or a question from Sean, some kids may have training wheels on bikes and could be slower than more experienced riders. How does the bike train accommodate different levels of experience?
Yeah, we have kids as young as kindergartners up to 5th graders. And there's kind of like sometimes 2 or 3 waves that happen with the bike train. Like I'll be in the front and have some of the faster kids, and I still slow them down. I'm like, we need to all stick together. And then there's kind of like a middle wave of children, and sometimes there's maybe 1 or 2 little ones at the very end, and there's always a parent with them. So we just kind of divide and conquer. It's not horrible if we get separated, but there's a parent that always sticks around with the slower ones because we want to encourage them too.
Awesome. With that, I want to move on to the scenarios. But just want to say thank you again to Sam and Megan. Here's their contact information. Again, I'll send that out. We're putting the link to the survey in the chat, but if you don't grab that now, then we'll also be sending that out after the webinar. Okay, so for the breakout rooms, I'll leave them open a few minutes after 1, just in case people are really having a great conversation, but I'll send a warning before I end them because we won't be coming back. So we're gonna have 3 breakout rooms just for folks to brainstorm a walking school bus or bike train given certain conditions. Some things that you should consider for each scenario is what safety measures you should do, how long the student commutes are gonna be, what form of transit or active transit would be best, how you're gonna incentivize volunteers, and how to incentivize your students to participate all year long. So we have 3 scenarios. The first is for a snowy Eastern Oregon community, a place that is a little more rural that gets a lot of snow. There's some great paths to the actual school, thanks to a Safe Route to School grant, we'll say. But again, trying to encourage students to bike all year round, given the weather conditions, or walk all year round. The next scenario is in a more metro area where there's great paths and things, but it's pretty heavily trafficked and in a commercial area between the residential areas and the school. So again, thinking about safety things for that. And then scenario 3 is in a nice suburban area where there's great bike paths to the school, but it's very hilly and gets a lot of rain. So you want to consider again how are we incentivizing those students to get to and from school? What considerations are we making for those hills? Okay, and so I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. And in theory, you should be able to select which breakout room you would like to go to. That should be in the bottom of your just a second. It should come up in the bottom of yes, there we go. It should come up as an option in the bottom of your screen. So if you go to that, there should be an option to choose your own breakout room. Just open that up. If you're having issues, let me know and I can assign you to one. Perfect. And again, to those breakout rooms. So number 1 is the snowy Eastern Oregon area. Number 2 is the more metro area with a lot of commercial places. And then number 3 is the suburban, hilly, rainy area. Again, let me know if you're having issues getting in there. It looks like people are figuring it out, so that's great. Perfect. I'm going to go join breakout number 1. Perfect. All